everyone to put their microphones on mute. Just to let you know, we are recording this event and it is going live on Facebook as we speak. So if you don't want to be seen, then please do turn off your cameras. My name is Remy Mohammed. I'm the president of the Association of Muslim Lawyers. A huge welcome to our fantastic International Women's Day event. The Association of Muslim Lawyers is a voluntary organisation, and one of our aims is improving diversity in the legal sector at all levels. Today's event is a celebration for International Women's Day, which is coming up on Monday. And this year's theme is Choose to Challenge, calling on us all to think critically about our own actions and how we can better promote gender equality and celebrate women's achievements. Myself, Saima and Iram at AML are thrilled to be collaborating with the amazing Leeds Muslim Youth Forum for this event. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Hafsa Hussain.
Salam everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Remy. I'm Hafsa Hussain. I'm one of the ambassadors for Leeds Muslim Youth Forum. I'm also joined today by Aisha Hussain, who will be taking on the Q&A section later tonight. The Leeds Muslim Youth Forum is a voluntary organisation. We've been going strong for around 10 years or so now, and each decade we have a new cohort. So I'm part of the current cohort, and we provide a platform for young people to express themselves and to develop themselves professionally. And I'm really excited that we are collaborating with AML for this event and to kind of have some great Northern representation on our panel tonight as well, which you'll hear from our speakers shortly. In the event, we're kind of showcasing and celebrating how Muslim women have broken barriers in their fields respectively, and hopefully the younger audience members today can take some of their courage and inspiration and take that into their future careers as well. So I'll just hand it over to Remy, who will be introducing our opening speaker, and look forward to the rest of the event too.
Thanks, Hafsa. It's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, who is Baroness Saida Warsi. Baroness Warsi studied law at Leeds University, going on to work for the Crown Prosecution Service before setting up her own legal practice. In 2007, she was elevated to the House of Lords, aged only 36, making her the youngest peer in Parliament. And in 2010, she was appointed by the Prime Minister, David Cameron, as Minister without Portfolio, becoming the first Muslim to serve as a cabinet minister. She's been awarded honorary doctorates from Aston, Birmingham City and Bolton universities, as well as from the University of Law. And if you haven't seen already, she's currently showing off her amazing stand-up comedy skills on Channel 4. I believe tonight is the next episode at 9 o'clock. It's my huge privilege to welcome Baroness Saida Warsi.
Thank you very much, Remy, for that really kind introduction. Although some would say that as a lawyer and as a politician, I've been training to be a joker all my life. So what I'm doing now is really years and years of practice, appearing before judges and getting my butt whipped for saying the wrong things and trying to develop a sense of humor. It is an absolute pleasure to be here among such amazing speakers. I was looking down the list and, these are all young women, older women like myself who have over the years touched my life, and I hope that I've touched their lives. And what it showed to me and what it does for me when I look at panels like this is it gives me that really warm feeling of the fact that the sisterhood is alive and that it cares and that it wants to make a difference. So I want to give you a few kind of short pointers about some of the questions that you asked in the briefing. And I'm really sorry that I'm not going to be able to join you for the whole Q&A, but if at the end of this, any one of your either panelists or participants wants to ask me a question, feel free to just give them my details and I'll be happy to pick up those questions as well. I'm nearly 50. I'm 50 in a few weeks' time, and that gives you the advantage of two things. One, it means that you don't take yourself very seriously, and you say the things that you probably wouldn't have said when you were younger because you don't really care anymore. And secondly, you can identify what I technically term as bullshit when people try and sell you what is actually happening in terms of change, but you know that you've been here before, you know where all the bodies are buried. So the three things I want to talk about today is really in the context of, are we meeting the demands of a younger generation? Often people, women of my generation will say, well, things have got so much better. And then I listened to my daughter, and I listened to her generation of friends. And I realized that their expectations are outstripping what we are actually giving them and what we are actually fighting for. And I think what today needs to be about is, yes, of course, congratulate all the women, and there are many, many here who have had great achievement, but also think again at whether we are really raising our game as communities, as women in law, as women in politics, as women in public life, to smooth the path for the next generation of women who I think look at what we see as success and say, that's not success. That's not good enough for me anymore. I'm not prepared to tolerate this kind of nonsense on these things. So the three things I always say is, look, in positions of leadership, you have to have these characteristics. There has to be authenticity. There's always been a way in which we've had double lives. Certainly my generation of women had to have a life at home and then a life in the office. But I think increasingly authenticity has got to be a must ask. If we're going to be given a seat at the table, or we are lucky or privileged or have worked hard enough to be able to find a seat at the table, then we need to bring the real version of ourselves to that table. And that real authentic version of ourselves needs to be accepted at the table. And that brings me on to the second thing, which is the way to do that is to be brave. Often when you walk through the door and you're the first person who's walked through that door, you want to play it safe. You want to kind of think, if I keep my head down, they might not notice I'm a woman. They might not even notice that I'm brown. They might not notice that I'm Muslim. They notice. So I think you have to start with this position of, I've been given this opportunity. I now need to be brave enough to make it count. And therefore, many of you will recall that when I was appointed as the first Muslim to serve in the British cabinet, I could have played it safe and I could have tried to fit in. Instead, what I chose to say was, I am different, and I'm going to make sure that people know I'm different from the start. I'm not going to be apologetic about it. I'm not going to hide about it. And therefore, the most obvious thing was to wear a bright pink shalwar kameez to my first cabinet meeting and say, hello, we've arrived. And this is the way it's going to be. Let's just get it out right from the outset. So be authentic, be brave. And the third thing I would say is be challenging. It's very easy for us to step back often and say, well, I probably shouldn't say that. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I've interpreted it wrongly. Maybe I'm just being awkward. Challenge. There is no point if walking through a door and achieving a space if you're not then going to push to create a bigger space so that when the next person comes along, they don't have to work as hard to try and create the space to be authentic and brave. And it's very easy. A, B, C, authentic, brave, challenging is something that I think you should think about every time you get into a leadership position. And I want to end really on this. The sisterhood is alive and kicking. I do not accept, and yes, you will get individual examples, but I know from my time in politics, and there is nowhere as ruthless as politics, whether you are in the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, or the Conservative Party, women, and particularly women of colour, have got an amazing sisterhood. We work together on issues that we find unity on. And when we don't find unity, we leave people alone and let them get on with their role. One of the things I say regularly to the newbies who arrive is, if you agree with each other, say it loudly and proudly. If you disagree with each other, go for a coffee and have it out. Right. And I think that's a really good way in which you enhance the sisterhood. Of course, we will have differences. In politics, there's no greater place where you will have differences, but find a way in which you can solve those differences behind closed doors, because the challenges for women of colour, and particularly women of colour who happen to be Muslim. And there was an independent report done by the Women's Select Committee, Maria Miller, who said you now have a triple whammy if you have all three of these characteristics. The challenges out there are enough without us ourselves creating those challenges. I hope that's given you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that you might address in the Q&A session, but I'm really looking forward to listening to the other speakers, and we'll hang around till about 7:15.
Thank you very much, Baroness Warasi. I have the pleasure of introducing our next guest, Lubna Shuja. Lubna is the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales. She will become the next first Asian president in October 2022. She has been the Law Society's council member since 2013 and is the chair of the Law Society's Membership and Communications Committee, as well as the member of the Law Society Board. Lubna is a solicitor with her own practice, Legal Swan, in Birmingham. She specialises in professional discipline and regulation and works with a number of regulators as chair of their disciplinary, fitness to practice, conduct and competence committees. She's also a mediator. Lubna, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum, thank you very much, and good evening to everybody today. I am absolutely delighted to be here, and want to say thank you to the Association of Muslim Lawyers and Leeds Muslim Youth Forum for inviting me to speak to you all. It's a shame that this event has to be virtual, as it would have been really nice to be able to meet you all in person and actually chat to you. It would have also been a personal pleasure for me to have an excuse to come and visit Leeds again, because it's one of my very favourite places. I have very many fond memories of the time that I've spent there. I am originally from Bradford, and I spent much of my time in Leeds professionally and socially when I used to live in Yorkshire. Now I've been given the slot to follow Baroness Warsi, and she's going to be a hard act to follow. So bear with me. I will do my best to keep you entertained and listening to me. To tell you just a little bit about myself, you've heard a little bit already from Iram. I'm currently the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society of England and Wales. For those of you who don't know much about that, it is the professional body that represents, promotes and supports solicitors all across England and Wales. We have a membership of about 200,000 solicitors at the moment. The Law Society was set up in 1825, so it's been around a long time, just over 125 years. And believe it or not, even though it's been around that long, as you just heard, in October next year, inshallah, I am due to become the first Asian and the first Muslim president of the Law Society. And even more shockingly, I will be only the 7th woman to take that role. So it's very exciting and hopefully groundbreaking. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a solicitor. I've been a solicitor for 28 years now. As you just heard, I have my own practice in Birmingham called Legal Swan Solicitors. I'm also a mediator, and I deal with professional regulation and discipline, and I work with a number of regulators chairing their disciplinary panels. I've been asked to speak to you today about my career experiences and my personal journey into law. I gather most of you are students, so I hope what I'm going to say to you today will help you in your future careers and along your journey and your path going forward. As I've mentioned, I'm from Bradford. I attended a comprehensive state school there, and I would say that I'm from a working class background. Law was never really on my radar when I was growing up. I didn't know any lawyers. I had no legal role models. I didn't used to watch legal programs on TV or any legal dramas. And law was something that I just never ever thought was for me. It wasn't something that I related to. It wasn't something that I could see myself going into. I really never thought I could be a lawyer. And in those days, we never had mentors. There was no such thing as a mentor. You know, you didn't have anybody that you could turn to. As I say, I didn't know anybody who was in law. I knew that I wanted to go to university because from a very, very young age, it had been instilled in me by my parents, as I'm sure it has been in many of you out there, that a good education was absolutely vital and you needed that to get on in life. So when it came to my A-level results, I found that I did much better than my teachers had predicted, surprisingly, because you know, they didn't think I was going to do that well, but yes, I proved them wrong, yay. So I'd got a place to do an English degree at university already, but a really good friend of mine at school actually persuaded me to look at law and said that law will be a better option for you. It will offer more opportunities in the future. So I looked into this a little bit further, and I managed to get myself a place on a law degree at Westminster University. And back in those days, we used to be able to apply for a grant from our local council, which is what I did. If you were successful and you managed to get a grant, the local council would pay for your course fees, and they would pay for some of your living expenses as well. Now, as I say, I was lucky enough to get a grant, but I do know that if a grant had not been available to me, there is absolutely no way I would have been able to afford to go to university. That's kind of the first hurdle, to try and get the funding sorted out. And one of the things that I wanted to mention while I'm on this call is that the Law Society does run a diversity access scheme, and that is open at the moment for applications. It's open until the 25th of April 2021, and details are on the Law Society website. The aim of the scheme is to support aspiring solicitors who face exceptional social, educational, financial or personal obstacles to qualifying as a solicitor. The scheme takes on 10 trainees every year, and it offers funding for the legal practice course, which many of you will be aware solicitors need to take. And it will also apply to the new solicitors qualifying examination, which is starting in September this year. The scheme also offers work experience. It provides you with access to mentors, and it will provide you with networking opportunities as well. The other funding options that are available, many firms will offer sponsorship to students. Universities offer scholarships. Some universities, not all of them, but some universities will offer scholarships. You may find that within your area, there are local charities and local authorities who will offer you grants. They might not cover the full cost of studying, but they will certainly contribute towards it. There are also a number of trusts who offer bursaries, and that's worth looking into as well. So one of the suggestions that I am going to make is that have a look at the Law Society website. There's a section on the website which is headed Career Advice section, and then there's a section under there that's headed Funding Your Studies. If you have a look at that, it will give you a list of websites where you can check whether you're eligible for funding assistance. And of course, student loans are available nowadays as well. There was no such thing as student loans in our days, so it's probably just as well that we managed to get a grant. So moving back to my journey into law, I went off to university. I started to learn about cases. I started to learn about law, and I started to realize how they applied to daily life. And I really enjoyed it. And I realized that I wanted to be a solicitor and I wanted to help people. That does sound like a cliche, but honestly, it's true. You've got to have that somewhere inside you. You need to have a need to want to help people. Otherwise, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. During the summer holidays, while I was studying, I was very lucky to be able to, I was offered work experience with a local Bradford firm. At that time, it was called Gordons and Dawson Solicitors. Now it's called Gordons, and some of you may be familiar with it. I started off doing 2 weeks of unpaid work with Gordons, but that led on to a offer of a summer vacation job, which actually went over 3 summers. So every summer when I finished from university, they let me go and work at the firm, and believe it or not, they paid me for it, which was even more amazing and quite unusual. And it was brilliant because it gave me the opportunity to shadow the solicitors working there, and to get a real feel for the kind of work that I would be doing when I qualified. So the next piece of advice that I'm going to offer to people out there, which I'm sure you've heard it all before, but I will say it again, get work experience. You absolutely need to try and get work experience. It's really important. It will help you to decide whether you really want to follow a career in law, whether it's really for you. And it will help you to decide what type of legal career might be suitable for you. So do you want to be a solicitor? Do you want to be a barrister? Do you want to be a legal executive? It will also give you the opportunity to make connections. It will enhance your CV, and it will demonstrate your commitment to the law and to the profession to future employers, because they will look to see how much effort you've made to try and find out more about the profession and gain experience. Now, the one thing I will say is that the work experience does not have to be restricted to working in a solicitor's firm on a placement or on a vacation scheme. It is a good place to start, but there are many, many, many other options too, which some of you may not be aware of. You can try barristers' chambers, and I know you're going to hear from, I think it's Mira that's going to speak to you later. She may talk to you more about barristers and their career path. But also you can look at citizens' advice bureaus, law centres, local community advice centres. And the other thing that you can also do that I would really highly recommend is just go and watch a hearing in your local court. Just go and sit at the back of the courtroom and just watch it. I mean, I know it's a bit more difficult at the moment during the pandemic. And in fact, at the moment, many courts are running virtual hearings. So it's even easier to watch a hearing at the minute because you can do it sat in your bedroom. All you need to do is contact your local court and find out whether you can observe a hearing. Try to pick one or pick a day when there might be some interesting cases going on. Or the other thing that you can do when the pandemic finishes and hopefully things get back to normal, as we are told they will be on the 21st of June, the big date that we've all got highlighted and starred in our diaries, find out from your local court whether they will let you do work experience either in the admin office there, or even just shadowing the ushers or the judges or somebody who works in the courtroom. And apart from the traditional legal type of occupations, you should be aware that many, many companies and local councils have in-house solicitors and they have legal departments within their organisation. And you probably will be a bit surprised to find out that nearly a quarter of the solicitor's profession works in-house. So they work for a company or for the local government. So the other thing that you can do is contact local companies, contact your local council and find out if they can offer you some work experience in their legal department. So that would include all sorts of organisations, insurance companies, banks, department stores, technology companies. You know, most large companies will have a legal department, and you know, if you contact them, they may well offer you work experience or give you the chance to go and do a couple of weeks there or shadow somebody. So really worth trying all of those options. So going back to my story again, I finished my law degree and I then did the solicitor's finals exams at what's now called the University of Law. And that's now called the legal practice course. In my day, it was called the solicitor's finals exams. And this is a one-year course that you have to take if you want to qualify as a solicitor. Much of that is going to change this year because, as I mentioned earlier, there is a new examination coming in, or a new way of qualifying as a solicitor, which is called the Solicitor's Qualifying Examination. And what that means is, for the first time ever, you don't have to have a law degree, and you will be able to qualify as a solicitor by using the apprenticeship route. So as soon as you finish your A-levels, you can start working as an apprentice with a law firm or with an organisation that will take you on a legal apprenticeship course, and then you take your exams as you are working. So that's another option. Even when I was looking for a training contract way back many, many, many years ago, I'm not going to be as brave as Saida and give you my age, but it was a long time ago. I remember I had to send off well over 100 application forms to firms before I was successful. And at that time, that seemed a lot to me. I'm sure for many of you, you know, that's probably normal. Maybe you send more than that. I don't know. But I had to send a hell of a lot of applications before I was successful. Eventually, I was offered what were called articles in those days. It's known as a training contract now, with Fladgates, a firm in London. And I did my training contract there, which I very, very much enjoyed. And whilst I was doing my training contract, at the same time, I worked at Camden Law Centre as a volunteer one evening every week. And that was a really good experience for me as well, because it exposed me to a different type of work. I was dealing with very vulnerable, low-income families or clients. And, you know, they were the kind of clients that we didn't always get to see in my firm where I was doing my training contract. So it's a really good idea to try and get a good broad range of experience if you can. The other interesting thing that I thought I would share with you today is that when I started doing my training contract, it's quite surprising when you think about it now, but at that time, there were only 709 solicitors who were from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background. 709. And that's just, I mean, that just makes me, really surprises me when I think back, because at the time, it wasn't something that I thought about very much. But now when I look back, that's hardly anything. It's a drop in the ocean, really. And when you compare that figure to 30 years later, so in 2018, which was when the last set of statistics were done, there are now over 20,000 solicitors who are from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background. So there's been some really, really good progress over that time. But, you know, when I was going through the process, there was nobody really that looked like me, nobody that I saw that looked like me, nobody that I could relate to, really. So interesting statistic, figures are going up, and I think that's a really, really good sign. And more firms are really, really alert to diversity and ensuring diversity within the profession. You know, they're really keen. Many of them will use blind recruiting, so where they don't, you know, they won't look at the name, the address, they won't look at what university you went to try and make sure that the process is as fair as possible. So going back to my journey again, I finished my training contract, I qualified as a solicitor, and then I moved back to Bradford. I, again, many applications, had to make lots of applications for jobs, but I did manage to get a job with a high street firm in Bradford. It was called Sampson Horner Solicitors at that time. And I worked there for about 13 years altogether. After the first 5 years, I was promoted to head of litigation. And then after 8 years, I became a partner in that practice. And I really had a good, you know, very enjoyable time there. I was the only Asian person there. I was the only, you know, ethnic minority person there. But the staff were incredibly welcoming, very interested to learn about my culture, interested to know more about me. And it was a really good experience. And I think, you know, I saw it as an opportunity to educate them as well as to make them, you know, hopefully able to relate to me and see that, you know, I was not a, you know, as Saida said earlier, you know, I haven't got two heads or anything. So that was a really good experience. In 2007, I moved to Birmingham, and that's when I set up my own practice. And I've been here for nearly 14 years now. And during that time, I've dealt with all different areas of law. I've dealt with family law, I've dealt with litigation where you've got one party claiming against another party. I've dealt with injury claims, I've dealt with buying and selling houses, wills, and I've done lots and lots of mediations as well, which is where you try to help parties to settle cases without involving the court. So, and alongside that, over the last 12 years, I've been dealing with professional regulation. So I have chaired disciplinary panels for regulators who regulate various occupations like accountants, solicitors, pharmacists, social workers, chiropractors, paramedics, physiotherapists, all sorts of things. So that's been a really, really interesting sideline. So coming towards the end of what I'm going to say, and I hope I've not spoken for too long because I haven't got an eye on the clock. I was asked what advice could I share with you all, and I'm going to pick up on something that Baroness Warsi just said. My advice is also about challenge, but it's about challenging yourself. You know, for me, I would say go outside your comfort zone. Take every single opportunity that presents itself, because you never know what it's going to lead to. It may lead on to something else. Just grab it and do it. If you think you can't do something, find another way of doing it. If you think you're not ready to do something, just do it. You know, you will find that you will find a way of working out how to do what needs to be done, and just do it to the best of your ability. And I honestly believe that with hard work, determination and resilience, you can achieve anything that you really want to achieve. So, I mean, from my point of view, I still can't believe that I am I am now the Deputy Vice President of the Law Society. And it still hasn't sunk in that, inshallah, I'm going to become the first Asian president next year. I never, ever thought that somebody like me could achieve something like that, but here I am. I've been very, very fortunate. I've had the support of many, many colleagues over my career. And, one phrase that you often hear, people will say to you, you can't be what you can't see. Well, my answer to that is, I think I've proved that wrong, because I am what I never saw. So although I may be the first Asian president of the Law Society, I sincerely hope that I will not be the last. I'll stop there, because I think I've got a horrible feeling I've gone way over my time, and I apologize if I have. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Lubna. It was really inspirational, and everything you mentioned about the Law Society Diversity Access Scheme sounds brilliant as well. And I'm really glad to hear your Yorkshire roots too, being from Leeds myself. I'm really excited for your commencement as the first Asian president next year, inshallah. And I'm really excited to also introduce our next speaker, which is Sarah Khan Bashir. And we were actually introduced by a community activist in Bradford. So we have another Bradford connection, and I think a good example of the sisterhood being alive and well. So Sarah Khan Bashir MB is a family lawyer and the founder of a top 3 best rated law firm, SKB Law. She has over 20 years legal experience, and Sarah Khan's mission is to improve access to law for everyone. And she has quite an innovative and inclusive approach to all of her work, and it's kind of earned the reputation of being a strategic, thoughtful, and powerful advocate for both her clients and in the local community. And in 2018, Sarah Khan Bashir ME also launched the SKB Law Academy, which supports young people that are interested in a legal career through a combination of workshops, guidance, and placements. And we're quite interested to see all the legal interviews that you did recently. And Sarah Khan is also a recipient of the Eleanor Roosevelt Award for Law, and is highly commended by the Law Society's Excellence Award. And she was awarded an MB in 2014, congratulations again, on the Queen's Birthday Honours List in recognition of her work with Mosaic, which is a Prince's Trust educational charity aimed at development. So that's just a brief introduction, but I'm going to pass it over to Sarah Khan Bashir to give a bit more detail into her career journey. Thanks so much for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you, Hafsa. I think you've just said everything that I was going to say, actually, but thank you for having me today. Thank you for really humbled to be invited and be on the panel alongside some amazing women. Now I've got to follow a baroness and a future president, and who've actually said a lot of what I wanted to say. So I think I'll just throw away my notes and go totally, approach it from a slightly different way. So as you said, Hafsa, I have a law practice in Bradford. We specialise in family law. We also have offices in London. And the brief when you gave me today about the International Women's Day Choose to Challenge, I thought I'll reflect on my career, what I've done, and talk about the challenges that happened, what I'm doing, the challenges I'm facing, and then look at the future and the challenges I anticipate. So did I think at 20 years of age I'd be running my own law firm? Of course not. I think it was in the introduction earlier, someone said, we're breaking down barriers, but I just do what I do. I don't wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to break a barrier today. I just think, this is what I want to achieve today. So, of course, I didn't think I'd be running my own practice. When I was 20, I was doing a degree in chemistry. No idea that I was going to end up being a lawyer. So the path to becoming a lawyer was not a straight one. And Lubna has very kindly set out the route you can take to being a lawyer. And mine was similar to hers in that I didn't do a straight law degree, but I did a chemistry degree and converted that to law. So I've got about 10 minutes to tell you about my career history. And sometimes I think, 10 hours is not going to be enough, but I'll do my best to give you the highlights and the lowlights. So after completing that degree in chemistry, I converted to a law degree. I did what was called the Common Professional Exams. I think it's the GDL now. And then I got a trading contract in a high street practice. And just like Lubna, it was really hard to get. The number of rejections I got, I wish I'd kept to this day, because when I talk about my story, I always say, the pile of rejections was this thick. And it was very, very disheartening. But eventually I managed to get a training contract by working for 3 months for free, just to prove to somebody that I was capable of doing it. Luckily, I was able to do that, but I know not everyone can do that. But it goes back to Lubna's point about, if you get the opportunity, get that work experience, however you can get it. I then got a job with the West Yorkshire Police Force, not with the CPS, but with the Civil Litigation Department. So I was working in the Force Solicitors Department. And for me, that was the best job in the world. A young Asian woman could walk into any police station, flash her ID card, and the police officers were like, okay, we've obviously done something wrong if the force solicitor has come to see us. So it had a lot of kudos around it. I didn't let the power go to my head, don't worry, it wasn't that kind of a role. But the challenges I found, I was a younger mom. I had 3 young daughters, all under the age of 10. My husband, Hafsa, is also a lawyer. And as a barrister, he was in lots of different courts every single day. So the childcare fell mainly on me. So getting 3 young children ready for school and nursery in the morning, rushing off to work or to court, and then doing it all in reverse at the end of the day was extremely challenging. And then the number of favors I had to beg, borrow and steal from relatives and friends, I'm still paying back to this day with flowers and chocolates and you name it. But the challenges I faced working for the police in a very male dominated environment were, and I know you've heard all the stories where I would go to court and I would be asked often, are you the defendant? That was a continuing story that I faced. I also remember going to a meeting. I don't know if anyone here is old enough to remember the riots that we had in Bradford, but we were doing an investigation into the riots and trying to lead work on that. And there was a meeting with some of the senior police officers to discuss, how we would deal with these challenges. So I came to this meeting, and 10 minutes later, the meeting still hadn't started. And I said, well, I've got another meeting after this one. Can we start with this one? And the answer I got from, I think it was a superintendent at the time, said, yeah, we're waiting for the force solicitor to arrive. I said, well, I have been sitting here for the past 10 minutes. So, if you sit and cry about these things, you're not really going to get very far. So you just have to keep finessing your offering, making yourself better, dealing with issues like that. Other challenges I faced were, as a lawyer, everyone, you have a certain role, a certain task, what you're going to do or how you're going to get there. For my own team as well as developing their legal skills and knowledge, I also like to develop them as individuals, because I find that those skills complement their law skills. So an opportunity presented itself when I was at the police, in that a forced marriage unit was created. And one of the officers approached me as a fellow colleague in the police force and said, are you able to help us with some of these young women to give us some experience about how to deal with some cultural issues? I approached my boss at the time, who flat right said, no, it's going to interfere with your work. It's got nothing to do with your work as a lawyer here, and I don't want you to do it. It was ironic that he was Pakistani and male. So, it was an opportunity that was afforded to me, but I couldn't take it up. So at some point during that journey, I made an active decision that I wanted a better work-life balance, in terms of my children, in terms of my work, and also some personal development. So an opportunity presented itself to run my own legal practice in partnership with somebody else. I didn't even think twice about it. It was one of those gut reaction kind of moves. Yeah, I'm going to go for it. So I set up with a male colleague friend, and we specialised in civil law, property, and a small family law department. Now, the male partner I had in the business was very, very good, but he didn't run the practice as I would want to run a practice. And was I true to myself? No, I don't think I was. I wasn't my authentic self. I found it challenging to stand up to him and say, actually, I think we should do things this way. Maybe it was my age at the time. I was young. I wanted to make this work. And partnerships can always be quite tricky. I learned a lot about business during the 10 years I was in that partnership. But what I also learned, that running a business, I wanted a purpose to that business, as well as, trying to turn a profit. So 10 years after that, I had the opportunity to become a sole practitioner. It was one of the most challenging decisions of my life because I never set out to run my own practice, you know, with a family, and which was equally important to me. You know, the amount of time sometimes we spend on our cases, we don't spend on our children. So, you know, I was very aware that I wanted an active role in my children's upbringing. So because I had this experience under my belt, I had two choices. I could decide not to become a sole practitioner, or I could decide that I am going to take on this challenge and run the firm how I've always wanted to run it. Alongside this, while I was working in the partnership, I had the, as Hafsa said, the opportunity to work with Mosaic as a mentor. Firstly as a mentor, then as a on the board of Mosaic. For those of you who know Mosaic, it was an incredibly successful mentoring charity created by Prince Charles to give young people in schools from mainly Muslim communities the connection with Muslim role models. And that formula in itself was magic, because the success of that mentoring program became national. So that I knew that that was something I wanted to continue working with, as well as being a lawyer. So 10 years later, SKB Law was born, and the SKB Academy. So I was always acutely aware of the fact that I wanted to give something back. I wanted to help more people, but not just do it for that moment in time or just to achieve, you know, to tick a box. I wanted to create something that would perpetuate a cycle of people caring for others and giving them a hand up, as Seda and Lubna had both spoken about. So I made an active decision that those values would align with how I conducted my legal practice. And that's the practice we have today. And that brings me on to what I'm doing now. Now, I digress slowly because I want to talk about a chap that I saw a presentation of his recently, and he's called Simon Sinek. And he's written a few books as well, but one of the presentations that I saw really resonated with me, because what he was talking about was everybody works, but what is your just cause? And that was something that I could sort of hang my hat on to say, actually, this is my just cause. My just cause is something that creates momentum in your life. You always say, I'm going to achieve this, I'm going to get that job, I want to earn that salary. But what is the momentum that keeps you going? What would you do even if you weren't paid to do it? And for me, it's where I want SKB Law to go now, and create a mission, which is, as Hafsa, you mentioned earlier, is to make law accessible. And I'm doing that in two ways. The first way is to make it accessible to more people entering law. I was so tired of hearing stories from people who looked like me saying, we don't get opportunities, we don't get work experience, you know, we keep getting rejections, or we're asked to work for free with a promise of a training contract and nothing awarded at the end of it. You know, how can we improve our chances? And it comes back to, you know, people say that you recruit in your own image. So we want more of us there, recruiting more of us, basically. The other mission that I have is to make legal services accessible to more people. There is a lot of law firms out there, a hell of a lot. We know the numbers, Lubna's just helped us, offering legal services. What I have a problem with is that legal services are not accessible to all. They're not being created to be more accessible to people who have certain cultural requirements out of those legal services. So that's my second mission. I'm just looking at the clock now. I know we're slightly overrunning. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit to sort of my top tips. Top tips are: always take an active decision to take on opportunities in your life and make those choices. It's what the other speakers have said. Be authentic, be your real self. Don't feel you have to comply and fit into a traditional mindset. Be aware of your own skills and qualities. Now, part of what we do at the SKB Academy, with the help of Seda Warsi, we created employability workshops. And what we did, we went into schools and we helped young people recognize what their own natural abilities are. What are your skills? And try and fine tune those. The program was called Unwritten Rules. So we delivered information and workshops about things that you're not told, you know, things about how to present your best self, so that when you do get a chance of an interview, you present your best self forward. And we were lucky enough to partner with a lot of local businesses who would then apprentice style interview these young people. And the results were transformational. The teachers would say that these young people wouldn't even make eye contact when we first walked in. And at the end of the workshops, these guys were high-fiving with future employers, swapping emails, taking selfies. And that's the confidence we want to give young people. So that is the kind of work, and it's embedded within the fabric of our law firm. Everyone who works for me gets involved on these workshops one way or another. They don't have a choice, actually. And I suppose I'm addressing the lawyers in the room at the moment, or anybody who wants to aspire to be a lawyer. But with the pandemic, there was a lot of bad things. But some of the good things that came out of it, if I can use that phrase, is that the legal industry had the biggest massive change that I've ever seen in my lifetime. And the whole traditional structure, mindset of law firms has completely been rewritten. You can throw away, you know, the old book on that. So seize that change, harness that change. Legal technology is where it's going. So I tell all aspiring lawyers or anybody who's just looking for the next big role, harness the legal technology that you can. Look at things online, look at YouTube, look at the information that's out there, and get a grasp of legal technology and what it can do to law firms. If you can take that on board, the next interview or the next CV you write, and you write in there that I'm actually very familiar with this case management system that can give you more efficiency or increase your bottom line or whatever, I guarantee you'll get an interview out of that. And if in interview you sell that and say, this is how I can add value to your company because I really know about legal technology, then I would be surprised if you weren't offered a job. I know that's a big say there, but legal technology is where it's at. That's the future of law firms. So that's my big tip on that. Just give me the wind up sign, Hafsa, if you need to. But the other points I want to say to you is trust your gut. Now, there's lots of decisions in life that we think and challenges. What am I doing? Am I doing the right thing? And we ask a lot of people, you know, where do I go now? What do I do? But trust your gut. You know, God gave us our gut instinct for a reason, you know, before we had computers and phones and other things to refer to. So trust your gut. You know, I've often used it in situations when I really don't know what else to do, and it's always worked out okay. Work on you. That's the next tip. I don't wake up every morning and think, okay, I'm brown, I'm a woman, I'm a Muslim, I've got that triple whammy that everyone's talking about. I wake up and I think, I'm Sarah. This is what I'm going to do today. This is what I'm going to try and achieve today. So work on yourself, finesse what your offering is. Now, embrace competition. Now, I say that because there's a very unhealthy culture in law and legal firms of competition, always keeping an eye on the competition, you know, no collaboration. Collaboration is the future, just like we've got today. You know, all the speakers spoke about sisterhood and collaboration, and I'm really proud to be part of that collaboration. You know, I can pick up the phone and I can speak to Lubna, I can speak to Saida. What did you do when this happened? What did you do when that happened? You know, that is what it's all about, and that's going to make us stronger in future. And it's what I spoke about before. We need to get more women like us in boardrooms, on benches, and in cabinets, you know, and I don't mean wardrobes. I mean, I'm talking about political cabinets. And one last thing, am I running out of time, Hafsa? Because the last thing I just want to say is really important, in that we don't take time ourselves, whoever we are, whether we're lawyers or not, to celebrate the small wins. And when I say the small wins, I say we're constantly trying to push ourselves forward, that momentum of keeping going. This is what I need to do next. This is what I need to do next. But actually look back and celebrate what you've actually done, a small win, whatever it is. You know, you think, oh, I need to fix this. I need to employ somebody because somebody's left, or I need to, you know, open up this to get more clients in. Once you've achieved it, celebrate it as a small win, and they'll all add up to probably one big, huge win. I, as a boss, do regular team meetings with my staff, and I always check in on them. How are you? Is everything okay? Can I help you? Is there anything else I can do? How can I make your job easier, right? But when do I ever do that with myself? Never. So I know it sounds odd, but have a Teams meeting with yourself, you know? Really ask yourself, where are you going with all of this? And well done for doing what you're doing. Well done for just being, you know, getting up each day and you know, giving it your best shot. So I think I'm well over. I thought I'd timed myself, but I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for your valuable advice, especially the me time. I try to carve out some time and book in my calendar to have a bit of me time. So yeah, thank you for that. So I have the pleasure of introducing our next amazing speaker, Mira Hamad. Mira is a barrister at Garden Court North. She specializes in inquests and inquiries and criminal defense work. She is currently instructed as part of a team representing bereaved families in the Manchester Arena inquiry, and is seconded counsel on the Hickman Rose Grenfell inquiry team. She also regularly represents families in inquests and defendants, particularly in protest-related cases. She initially qualified as a solicitor and transferred to a bar in 2019. Welcome, Mira.
Hello, thanks for having me. What's the point of representation? What's the point of breaking barriers and having more women that look like us in positions of leadership? Because, to be honest, if we look at the world around us and we're content with it and we want it to stay the same, then there is no point in changing the leadership. And there is no point in trying to make things different in terms of a look if we're not committed to bringing that representation into fruition. So we have now a woman who looks like us as Home Secretary. I don't know how represented I feel. And I think that would be my advice for people setting out on their career. Intention is at the heart of Islam. It doesn't matter as a Muslim where you get to, how high you fly, what you achieve. What matters is, what's the intention? What's driving you? Why did you set out on the path that you set out on? And for students, for people who want to go into the legal world, you've got a path ahead of you that frankly is going to be a long one, because it's competitive, it's difficult, it's long days, long hours, hard work. So you better be sure what it is that you're doing it for. And I don't mean what you're doing it for in terms of what you're going to say at interview. I don't mean, oh, I like to be challenged and I love to be in a fast-paced environment. No, I mean, actually, what is it that you want? If you want money, why? What is it about getting money that's so attractive to you? If you want to be a barrister because you want to stand up in court and you like talking, what is it about that that appeals to you? Is it because you like the prestige? Because I'll be honest with you, the prestige is nice. It is. Once you qualify as a barrister, there's a sense of prestige and it's quite nice. You know, your parents are like, oh, Mira's a barrister. It's lovely. But it's not enough for me to get me out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to Barnsley and defend someone when I've just got a case the night before. It's not enough. And so what is it that is enough for you? And the other thing about representation is that you can't toe the line. If you're really going to represent who you are, well, who you are is different than who is supposed to be in the room. And one of my legal heroes is Alison Munro QC. She's a Black barrister. And one of the things that she's really fond of saying is, if there isn't a seat at the table, bring your own fold-out chair. And I think it's really important for us not to think about where we're going to get, how high we're going to fly, but what it is that we want when we get there. What are we demanding? What's the point of the seat at the table? And I think we have something quite unique. Maya Angelou talked about the beginning of her journey and the beginning of her career. And she said that when she got a job, she decided to move out. And when she left her house, the last thing her mum said to her was, remember that you've been raised. You've already been raised. You're going out into the world and you've already been raised. Don't let anybody raise you. Don't let anybody tell you who you are, because I've already done that. And I think as Muslim women, as immigrant women, we come from a proud, strong tradition of women who have sacrificed and fought and achieved to get us to where we are. And I think we should be proud of that tradition. And I think we should be proud when we stand up that we're not just standing for ourselves. We're standing for our mothers and our grandmothers and our aunties who came before us and who sacrificed and who had principles and who had ethics and who wouldn't want us to just be a face in the room. They'd want us to be who they raised us to be. And so I think that's the other lesson that I would take. The legal world is competitive. It is easy to get lost in the ego of it, in the career ladder. And I think you have to keep hold of your ethics. You have to keep hold of who you are, even if you think that that's not going to get you to where you want to be. So, for example, before I started, and I started as a paralegal maybe about 10 years ago now, before I started, I don't think that I had ever really had an actual in-depth conversation with a middle-aged white guy in my life. I don't think. And I've more than made up for it since then. And so I had this real nervousness about how do I interact with these people? I didn't really know what to say. I didn't really know, well, what do people talk about? And there's this pressure for you to mold yourself into somebody that you're not, to go to pubs and drinks and turn up and be the sort of like happy Muslim in the corner. And you don't have to do that, because if you are yourself, proudly yourself, you have a sense of who you are, your talent comes from that sense of self, your advocacy comes from that sense of self, and you don't need to play the game that's put in front of you, because you're bringing something that nobody else has. And so those three things would be my advice. Firstly, intention. What are you doing this for? Secondly, ethics. Remember who you were raised to be. And thirdly, don't compromise. Don't play a game that you feel you're being forced to play.
Thank you so much, Mira. It's so inspiring always hearing from you. Being called to the bar myself and kind of embarking on this path, I'm always going to remember the quote that you just said about advocacy coming from your own sense of self. I think that's so powerful. And also what you mentioned about those that raise don't want to be in, just a face in the room. They want us to be who they've raised us to be. So thank you so much for that. It's definitely something really practical that all those aspiring lawyers out there can take forward. So thanks so much. I hope we can delve into some further points that you mentioned in the Q&A. It's my pleasure now to introduce Sophia Bunsi DL. So Sophia is one of the UK's leading practitioners on Muslim women in the criminal justice system. She's a founder and the national coordinator of the multi-award-winning Muslim Women in Prison project, which is a resettlement program. And the program is one of the first of its kind in the UK. And it's based at the Kidman Centres in Bradford. And Sophia kind of combines her current professional role with her activism and passion for interfaith, youth and community development work, and charitable work, social and civil cohesion, which I really think is so strong in Yorkshire. And Sophia's a recipient of the Butler Trust Award in 2017, and also the Asian Women of Achievement Award in 2017 as well. And in 2020, she was confirmed as the Deputy Lord Lieutenant for West Yorkshire. So congratulations again on that huge commencement. I will pass it on to you now, Sophia, for you to do your segment. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Hafsa. Thank you to the Leeds Muslim Youth Forum, as well as the Association of Muslim Lawyers for this invite. I easily accepted. Look at the lineup, absolute trailblazers, and you know, some real role models for myself, as well as so many other women in the sector. You know, it's hard act to follow, really, isn't it? But I have to confess, I'm probably the black sheep within all this, because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a barrister. However, having founded the Muslim Women in Prison project, I've had some real insights into the backgrounds of Muslim women as they enter the criminal justice system, and perhaps their inability to maybe avail timely support, but also looking at the intersectionality of disadvantages they face as they enter the legal process, and sometimes a lack of understanding around that based on the women's gender, their race, their ethnicity, their faith, and the need for more appropriate and timely support within the early part of the CGS that may mean less women, Muslim women, are going into the prison system. So my early career, actually, it didn't start in prison work. So I have worked in prisons for about 9 years now, and you can possibly count the number of Muslim women that you know working in prisons on one finger, really. If you're lucky, not even one hand, one finger, because unfortunately, there aren't many women working in prisons for many, many reasons, as I learned in the early part of my career. So I started off in women's empowerment and youth empowerment work in a grassroots organisation based in Huddersfield. And while I was there at the time, I noticed that actually I was hearing community stories about Muslim women becoming incarcerated, but had very little knowledge around what happened to them post incarceration. So they were going off to prison. There was whispers in the community. I really didn't hear anything around family visits, around those women returning back. So I guess my journey started as a point of curiosity, to be honest, thinking, what's going on here? What is this dynamic that's playing out? And at the same time, we were having a very open conversation around Muslim men in incarceration. So the real disparity at a grassroots level was really apparent for myself. And I guess, like many other people, it starts as a seed of intention, where I thought, I wouldn't mind going in and researching and looking at what is playing out for Muslim women here. And my academic degree had been in behavioural sciences and research. So I spoke with one of my managers at the time and said, look, there's something going on here and I'd really like to know more. And him being his usual self, he's done 40 years in the sector, said, why don't you send a fax over to the prison and see if you can go in? And I said, fax, what's a fax? Send a fax over, is anybody going to pick this up? So that's just what I did, actually. I sent over a fax to the neighbouring prisons and said, look, I'm a community development worker, really interested in what's going on around Muslim women and incarceration. I'd like to come in and do some research. And to my surprise, they actually faxed back and said, yeah, actually, why don't we have a meeting? Why don't we have a sit down meeting and discuss this? And I think that's when the reality really dawned on me that actually, oof, what have I done here? This means I'll have to go and actually carry out work in a prison and understand some of the dynamics and what's going on. And I think at that point, I had a sensitive conversation with my family around doing some research in prisons. And I think that's when the reality dawned on me around the stigma of certain professions and how certain professions are not deemed suitable for women. So from my family's perspective, I think they had a lot of anxiety around perhaps my personal safety. Maybe they'd seen a bit too much Prisoner Cell Block H or Orange is the New Black and thought, right, you don't really need to go in there, Sophia. You know, it's a really dangerous place, and you know, you're double degree qualified. You could really be doing anything. Why go and do this? Why go and embark on this profession? And at that point, maybe it wasn't enough to just say, well, it's curiosity to go in. But also, I think there was some community soundings and dynamics that played out in terms of, you know, the appropriateness for a Muslim woman. You know, there was people in the wider conversation perhaps having family having conversations with my mother about you know, the eligibility. This is a single woman who's going to work in a prison. It will really diminish her eligibility, as well as what will people say, the usual thing that plays out in our communities. What will people say? And it's just not an appropriate provision for an appropriate place for you to be working in. So I guess that was some of my personal concerns at a starting point. Before I'd even got into doing the job, it was mitigating what I saw as cultural concerns and no-go zones for Muslim women. And for myself, actually, I talk about this quite openly now, but at that point, I just said to my family, look, I'll go and work in the prison. It's 15 months research. It's a set pilot study. We just won't tell anybody, because there is no other Muslim women working in there. So there's no way I'll get found out. We'll just go in and do the research. And I think it was at that point that I really started to reference my own personal values, because what I could see playing out was actually cultural inequalities for women. Women that were in spaces that were out of sight, out of mind, and not knowing or being able to avail support, which made me feel really uncomfortable. But I persevered. I really sort of found my own moral compass. I, you know, mitigated some of the concerns and also learned to shut out noise. I think that's really important sometimes when you're trying to achieve something, or you're the first to go into a profession, because pretty soon I learned that actually, having done a desktop research, having done a journal research, having even researched in the women's sector, there was absolutely no information around Muslim women's experiences in prison or post-release. And that to me really was damning. It showed the invisibility of these spaces where these women were. And the lack of knowledge we had around their stories as well made me really uncomfortable. But I think from an Islamic point of view, once you know, then you know, and you have to do something about that. So I think that really propelled me forward, me thinking that, okay, I really need to take this move forward. Yes, it's going to be scary. It's not something that anybody before me has done. So there's no reference point. And I think for me, that was the scariest move in my career. You know, when you go to work in a prison, there's no handbook. There's an entire community and a system that you have to learn. There's no 50-50. There's no phone a friend. Your mobile phones are left in the car. There's no having supportive aspects of going to work in the prison. The first panel that I met, the governors panel, I was so fortunate, it was an all-female governors panel. They had very little understanding around the pull and push factors for Muslim women in criminality. And the only thing they really did say was, well, actually, these women are very quiet, the women in prison. So when we're not sure they've got any problems because they're quiet. And it was me explaining, actually, it's quite the opposite of that. They have huge problems, and this is why they're so quiet. But culturally, as women, we're told to, you know, really oppress disclosures, and, you know, to really conceal a lot and self-sacrifice a lot of the time. So my journey there was difficult going in. At times it was lonely going in, but it meant I had to try and create allies and avail support. I managed to complete a 15-month study at HMP Newhall and Askham Grange prisons. And it wasn't, as women were not as forthcoming with some of their traumas that they'd undergone. You know, to my surprise, I thought maybe Muslim women in prison were all very young, and they weren't. My first cohort showed there were women as young as 20 years old and going all the way up to 63 years old. And I really learnt a lot about the drivers to Muslim women's offending, the fact that actually the inability to seek timely support was actually what put a lot of these women in prison. So there were some stories around, you know, domestic violence, which had been undisclosed, you know, sexual violence, coercion, some women taking the blame for men, which made me really uncomfortable in thinking that, okay, some of these women are here not because they should be here, but because actually there's something else playing out within our communities. But it was really important for me to be able to mitigate some of those concerns and learn a craft in a space that was invisible. And let's be honest, a cause that not many people are sympathetic with. You know, that you say, you know, I work on the Muslim Women in Prison projects, it's not an automatic cause that people will sympathize with. So I did actually find myself very much being a storyteller, writing the stories of women and telling the stories of women. And actually, as I've said, a bit of a personal risk to myself as well, knowing that there could inevitably be some sort of a backlash for this, but also knowing that it was the right thing to do. I remember I've been into 7 prisons up and down the country, but I remember going into one prison where, you know, sometimes you expect support from perhaps your own community members. And I remember seeing an imam in one of the prisons who said, you know, a prison is not a place for a Muslim woman to work, not outside of the chaplaincy department. So really, I suggest you take your bat and ball and go home, because you won't be making any difference here. You know, and it really struck me that not only was I working against really cultural and dated, you know, dynamics within the community. Sometimes I was working against patriarchy. Other times I was working in a CGS system, which was showing huge disparity for BAME prisoners. So we know this, those of you in law that have seen David Lammy's 2017 report, huge disparities for Black, Asian, minority ethnic people when it comes to sentencing. You know, we have a Muslim prison population of 13,500 Muslim men, which is 16% of the prison population, set to rise, it's predicted in the next decade to 40 to 50% Muslim men in prison. So there was huge drivers to what was going on in our community. But I knew that the only way to really overcome this was to document what was happening within that system, within that really invisible system that the community was easily able to dismiss and write off people and say they're not really our problem, especially women who were actually disclosing in the research their inability to be able to go back to sometimes families or communities. So it just felt like there were no solutions for them. It has been a difficult journey. I'm not going to lie, it's meant mitigating a lot of factors, but it's also meant working at several levels. So on a daily basis, a bit like Sarah and a few others have mentioned, what you find is you're working at several different levels. In fact, I think I do work the job of 6, 7 people. So not only am I a researcher, I'm on my 4th piece of research actually at the moment with Sheffield, Hallam and Leeds Beckett universities looking at Muslim women and assistance. But some days I can find myself working behind the prison gate, other days I'm hands-on in the community. And as the years have gone on, I think what we've really managed to do as a project is make it acceptable to use the word Muslim women prisoner. It was very stigmatized when we started out. I think the word Muslim was being really looked at through the lens of security as well. So a lot of people that would mention the word Muslim is pretty toxic. So it's about really creating a new narrative and saying, no, actually, there's an acceptability of using and aligning yourself to your faith. And for me, that's meant really, and this advice I'd give to some of those on this Zoom call is understand your space. So if you understand the spaces that you're looking at and that you're working in, and knowing when to be hard and when to be soft. So there's been times where actually I've had to be a little bit more forthcoming, a little bit more, some may say aggressive as a Muslim woman to get my way. Or to, you know, then other times just being soft and letting some certain things slide, just because you know you're working within a very complex system and you need to be understood or you need to move on. What I've also found really helpful in my career, like I said, there weren't many role models for me to look up to because there was nobody else doing this practice. I mean, I've seen a couple of colleagues now that have, you know, are working in the CGS and I've come into that in the past few years on the call. So it's really encouraging to see them there. But, you know, having a mentor that you're able to take some advice from, or somebody that you can just use as a sounding board. As I've said, prisons are very constrained spaces, you know, that there is no reaching out to colleagues or being able to have that more, you know, if you need that your contact list is outside. If you get a break, you know, on your lunch break and you want to go out and make a call, you do that. But it's a very regulated space. So it's so important. You need to have somebody that, you know, can nudge you, or somebody to share with, or somebody to offload on and say, look, things are not fair, things are not changing. If anything, the CGS system's getting considerably worse. What advice would you have? Or somebody that's able to navigate you. And most importantly for me, as I've said, I think it was really about me knowing my moral compass as well, and saying, look, for me to do this piece of work, as stigmatized, as socially ostracized as this group of women are, I wouldn't be doing the cause any justice by not telling this story. And as I've said, it's taken a lot of self-reflection, it's taken a lot of criticism, but over the years, what's happened now is, alhamdulillah, you know, I'm a 4-time national award winner within the CGS. You know, as Hafsa said, I am a deputy lieutenant for West Yorkshire. So, you know, I still think back to the comments that were made in my early days in terms of, you're a woman, what difference will you make? This space is not a space that you should be in. And comments like that have always driven me, actually. They've always driven me forward. And, you know, I'm so grateful for the support that I have had. You know, not only have we done numerous pieces of research, but we have a re-entry hub in Bradford, which now women are able to return back to and able to avail support with benefits and housing. And alhamdulillah, about 70% of our women go on to employment, further education. We now have women that are working in probation services, some are working in mental health, others are in administrative roles. But I think I do take a lot of energy and inspiration from those women as well. And, you know, at the moment we're in the process of just completing a film that we've made with Muslim women prisoners as well, which will be hugely powerful. And I think it is important that we do reflect back and look at the journey where we've come from. Yes, we're all on that gerbil treadmill where we're trying to, you know, absolutely have a work-life balance. We're trying to balance our professional lives with our personal lives, the very little personal lives we have. Actually, many of us carry on working on the laptop till 1 o'clock in the morning. But I think for me, it's always, personally for me, it has always been about leaving behind a legacy. And I'm proud to say that myself and my team have done that. We can look back with pride and we can say that, look, despite all the challenges and the negativity, we persevered, we were resilient, and we've created a real knowledge bank around the drivers to Muslim women and their offending, as well as not just complaining. I think sometimes as a community, we can have a lot of gripes. And we can always, you know, this isn't right in the CGS and this isn't working and this should be better. Sometimes you have to be that person to produce those solutions rather than just, you know, a broken record complaining about what isn't right. Produce those solutions yourself. And that means, unfortunately, getting your hands dirty and being hands-on. I still, to this day, despite the roles that I'm in, will come down, will still, you know, participate in grassroots work. I'll make sure that I'm on the ball, astute, in a climate and a dynamic that's moving really fast, and one for the women. Alhamdulillah, the success that we've had with the Muslim Women in Prison project, we've now been asked to look at Muslim men in prison, which is, you know, a huge ask, isn't it? But to then, for governors, for prison governors, to then really turn around and this was interesting, the first governor that I'd worked with 9 years ago, that had really followed the careers that we'd had and said, look, can you turn around and do the same for what you've done for Muslim women in prison, for Muslim men? Can you come up with community-based solutions? So, you know, it's been quite a journey. It's had its hurdles, you know, it's had lows, it's had highs, but alhamdulillah, as I've said, it's been hugely rewarding, and it leaves behind a massive legacy.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you for sharing your personal journey. Your resilience, dedication, drive, just insane. So thank you very much. So moving on to question time. This question to all our amazing speakers. So the question is, what advice would you give yourself? So who would like to go first?
Sorry, for those that didn't hear that, the question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I mean, probably for me would just be chill out. Like, you've got a lot more time than you think you have. And I'm a fairly chilled person anyway, but I think I could have been even more chilled. Don't worry about things that you can't control. Just take a deep breath and take things as they come.
I think personally for me, it's just about being brave and not taking no for an answer, especially my career. You know, I was told no a lot of times. I was, you know, sort of told about the implications of my actions and what could happen, and rejections, a lot of stumbling blocks, but completely persevere and follow your gut. I think we don't do that enough. What's the worst that could happen? It could go wrong, right? But absolutely follow your gut, and then there's no regrets, because those regrets are a lot harder to live with.
I think what I would say would be just don't turn away any opportunities, because there's some opportunities in life that you just never know where they're going to lead. And to be honest, some of the projects I'm involved in now, they've come about as a result of an opportunity that I didn't think was connected to what I did, but one way or another it's come round. You know, my faith is very, very important to me. And I think that everybody's Ruti and Rizq is written. I was told that a long time ago, and I firmly, firmly believe that. So reaching out and collaborating is extremely important. And that's why I would say as well, is that if you can help somebody get where they're going to go, you'll just get extra brownie points. But they're going to get it, whether you're going to help them or not. So why not help them?
I think great advice from all of them. I agree with everything that the others have just said. I already said earlier, challenge yourself, you know, take on challenges, don't miss opportunities. Every opportunity that comes your way, just take it, because you just don't know where it will lead you to. And most importantly, just be determined. Have a goal in your life, be determined and stick to it. And, you know, you will get there.
Just another question, actually, that kind of touched on what Sarah mentioned. What are some ways that women can support other women, either in the profession or outside of this?
We can be mentors for each other, I think, you know. I would like to be able to help others. You know, if there's advice that I can share from my career path, I'd be very happy to do that. You know, I want to see people coming up the ladder behind me, if you see what I mean. So yeah, just being there for each other, being open to sharing your own experiences, sharing what you've gone through, and hopefully inspiring others to see that it's not as difficult as perhaps they might think it is.
Yeah, I'd agree with Lubna on that one. And don't be afraid to be vulnerable. You know, we're often taught as women that we have to be tough and have this hard exterior and show how strong we are, but it's not like that all the time. You know, this pandemic has shown us that. You know, open yourself up and, you know, speak to other women, see how they can support you. It's not just always you supporting others. And, you know, through that vulnerability comes some strength. So it comes back to what I think every speaker has said today is, you know, choose to challenge, reach out and collaborate with each other. And this seminar in itself, this webinar, this Zoom today, is just proof of the pudding. And from what Lubna said right at the beginning, I really hope that this event becomes a regular event and just grows. And I can see it growing year on year, and hopefully in person too.
Yeah, I would say especially actually in terms of women at the bar, but also solicitors, I think we have the responsibility to structurally change our profession, because at the moment, the structure of our profession is not friendly to women. It's not designed for women. And it's not that women have a problem in adapting to that structure. It's that the structure is designed for people who don't have family responsibilities, who don't have caring responsibilities, and who are men. And I think we're doing a disservice to the next generation if that isn't an issue that we tackle.
Yeah, I think Mira makes a really good point there. If you are in a position to do so, then tackle those structural inequalities. An example of this is that I had and I still have an all-female team just by opportunity, coincidence, look, call it what you will. And, you know, I could see the struggles that some of them had. Some of them were carers, some of them were parents of young children, and trying to balance that work-life balance was incredibly difficult. So I was in a position to be able to offer flexible and remote working. So I sat them down and said, look, you don't have to rush if you're late. You don't have to stress if the little one won't get out of bed and have breakfast before you need to get to work. You are responsible for your own time. So, you know, that I'm going to hand that flexibility over to you. And to be honest, Mira, the productivity, I had to kick them out of the office that day because they felt calmer knowing that their childcare responsibilities, which are just as important to me as my career. You know, I've got a 16-year-old who just wants to take over the world. And I'm like, oh, Aisha, calm down, you know, but she needs my time, you know, as much as the firm needs my time, she needs my time too. So yeah, 100% echo what you say. If we can change it, then don't be afraid to change it.
Absolutely. Sophia, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Identifying those open doors for yourself as well. I know Sarah has always kept her door open for our project, the Muslim Women in Prison project. I've reached into her, called her, and I think as women you have that level of understanding with one another, don't you, whether in terms of the disadvantages you may face in your career, your caring responsibilities, the pressures of the career, but just somebody knowing and somebody saying, look, the door's open anytime you need me. I understand there's aspects of this role you may not understand, but I'm here, even if it's just for a coffee, for a listening ear. So identify those women that will do that for you, but also vice versa as well. You're not alone. It can feel lonely. It can feel lonely in certain careers, and like you're the only one that has to, you know, look like you're super determined and do not need any help at all. But as many of the women have said, you know, we're all quite vulnerable in different ways. We all have needs, and we all need networks, and we do definitely need that sisterhood. And it's about identifying those women that can give you that genuine sisterhood.
Thank you.
Those
Just
are some
one
amazing
last
responses.
Sorry, Aisha, go ahead.
I was going to hand it over to you for the last question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So yeah, last question. It's from Sagar. It's about how do you overcome fear when you're scared of taking on new challenges? So it's open to everyone.
Just do it. Just do it. That's the one piece of advice I'd give. If you're scared of doing it, that's a really good reason to just do it and take it on. You will find a way. You will work it out. Somebody will help you along the way. Just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about 80% of your time as a barrister is just doing terrifying things in front of people that you have that are really not. It's a bit like being a comedian and going to stand in front of a heckler sometimes when you go into court. And to be honest, I go back to that quote from Maya Angelou, and I think, you know what? It's not just me standing here. It's me, but it's everyone who's brought me here. It's all of the people that have helped me to get here. It's my family here. And I think that can help you feel your space. And then on a practical level as well, if you're public speaking and you're really scared, wiggle your toes. Sounds very silly, but if you just sit and you wiggle your toes, then it takes your mind off your fear, because it actually takes a lot of effort. So you're just sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm wiggling my toes. And that really actually does calm you down. It works.
Absolutely. I think I'm just going to come in there and say, just jump. I remember my experiences of going into prison. It was like, I can really overthink this. And I think it's important, as we said, about blocking out that unnecessary noise as well, and those voices that are telling you, whether it's your own or external, that you can't, and all the things that could possibly go wrong. The one thing that worked for me was I just jumped. I just did it. What was the worst that could go wrong? That I wouldn't want to work in that environment anymore. So yeah, absolutely. Just don't jump. Don't overthink things. just as silly as it sounds, just do it, get yourself in that space, and once you're in, very often it just becomes second nature. But even for a lot of us on this call, you know, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but you know, public speaking still terrifies me to this day. It still terrifies me. It's like, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? And you know, will I mispronounce this, or will I? And as much as, you know, we're really had quite a long career coming into this, we're still daunted every single day. We're still daunted by those little things that you might think come second nature. So we're all human, we're all vulnerable. We still take those risks every day, and we still battle with those internal voices every day. It's perfectly natural, even at this stage. So absolutely, if you're starting out new in your career and you're thinking and hearing voices, we still hear them every day.
They say, don't they, that the only thing to fear is fear itself. And if you hang on to that feeling about what fear is like, let me tell you, on the other side of that is an amazing feeling. Once you've challenged it, like all the women have said, you challenge the other side of it. And, you know, there'll be days where someone in my team will say, Sarah, actually, I don't understand this. I don't know how to do this. What's the answer? And they're looking to me to have that answer. And I'm telling you, if I don't know the answer, I'll go out into the corridor and I'm like, oh, I'm scared. What do I do? Well, have a bit of a think, calm down. I'll wiggle my mirror. And then I go back in and I'm like, this is how we're going to do it. This is what we're going to try. So, you know, it happens to us all.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sorry. My name is Afnan Shajan, and I just have a question. Is that fine if I can do that? Or is there like a system that we're going through?
Hi, Isnan. Yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you so much for, you know,
coming though from you.
Can you hear me?
It's a bit unclear. Have you put your question in the chat? I can ask it for you.
Is this fine now?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm not on the laptop or anything. First and foremost,
go ahead.
I just want to thank all of you, first of all, like, you know, for organizing this event and everything. And I feel so fortunate to have role models to look up to. And like, you know, how Sophia was saying that at her time, she didn't have such people. So thank you so much for, you know, being role models for me and motivating me to go further. As a law graduate who's, you know, graduated in 2020 in coronavirus time, it's been incredibly difficult to, you know, get paralegal work or legal assistant work. And I've tried to apply to different places, and the most I've gotten is a trainee paralegal work, which was for 3 months. And now that is over, and I'm just, you know, looking for something bigger that can help me progress further in my career and, you know, just help me grow further on. And especially, like, you know, I've had a lot of work experience in family and criminal, and I've done all of that. And to have graduated now and not be able to get the job that I want, it's just really hard. So do you have any advice for that? That's to everyone on the panel.
Great. Does anyone have any advice? Does anyone want to go first?
Shall I go?
I'll just come in very, very quickly. There is an opportunity with the Law Society at the moment. They're looking for either newly qualified or paralegal or trainee solicitors to work with the Brussels office. We have a European office in Brussels, and you don't have to travel there during the pandemic. You know, everything's remote working. You can work where you are. And details of that are on the Law Society website, and I've also posted it on my LinkedIn profile. So if you have a look at my LinkedIn profile, it's on there. Apply for that. I think there's a closing date in a couple of weeks' time or something. That would be a really good opportunity and something for you to get on your CV if you're successful with that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that. I'll definitely look into it.
Also, just to add, if you've got time, as part of the employability workshops, what we did was really drill down into people's CVs. So if you'd like some help on that, send me your CV and we'll give you some free time and look at it and see how we can make it sort of work better for you.
That would be so great. Thank you so much. I'll definitely get my CV to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Afnan. Thank you so much. And now to hand over to Iram.
Thank you so much for all of our panelists for accepting our invites and coming on tonight and sharing with us your incredible journeys and experiences and invaluable advice, particularly the wiggling of the toes, Mira. Thank you so much. I mean, I think all of our listeners can agree that you are all in your own unique way inspirational, and that they can take away, I think, many positives, but definitely something positive in terms of every single one of you, whether it's being yourself, being brave, challenging yourself, opening yourselves up to opportunities, trusting yourselves, and just going out there and doing it. So thank you so much. I want to thank the Leeds Youth Forum. They have been amazing in arranging this as well, and collaborating with the Association of Muslim Lawyers. So before I hand myself over to Hafsa, we would also like to thank our attendees, because without you, these events aren't just possible. And we hope, inshallah, next year we're able to do this in person, face to face, along with many other events. If you haven't already, you'll see that there is the AML links to our social media. Please join us. And I am grateful to our panelists, to this whole event coming together so beautifully. There is something really important to take from here, and I believe that to support each other and encourage each other, that is the theme for me that's coming through, the invaluable ability to encourage and celebrate each other's successes and achievements is something that is immeasurable. So thank you, everybody. And Hafsa, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to echo everything that's been said. Being so inspired, and to end the event, I just want to do a little bit of like a call to action to everyone on the Zoom, which we want all the attendees and the participants and panelists to kind of go away with and think. For International Women's Day, 2 calls to actions that we can do. One is we want everyone to kind of reach out and celebrate a woman who's inspired you and tell her. And the second action is kind of a personal pledge that you can do. So like one thing that we can do to support women going forward in their careers, and in turn, you know, inspiring the next generation. And if you want to kind of put forward your own personal pledge, please do so and use this hashtag International Women's Day Future Gen Pledge. I'll just put it in the chat. And we are really looking forward to kind of hearing some of the pledges that you come up with and sharing them and retweeting, and hopefully, you know, starting a conversation going forward into the International Women's Day celebration week. There's loads of exciting things happening all over and celebrating women in all types of fields. So please do reach out and tweet us, and we hope that you've enjoyed the event. We'll be sharing the recording soon as well on our socials. But yeah, just echoing the thanks that everyone else has given. And I really appreciate everyone taking your time out this evening to celebrate International Women's Day with us. Thank you so much again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Cool.